Welcome to Leadership in the Line of Fire. On the fireground, the greatest danger is not always the fire. It can be a wind shift, poor visibility, fatigue, or one bad decision made under pressure. The fire may look the same, but the conditions around it have changed. Life works like that too. Difficult people, family dramas, business pressures, and the need to fix everything can pull you into battles you were never meant to fight. In this episode, we're going to look at how to recognize the difference before the wrong problem consumes your time, energy, and attention. Sometimes I'm sent to fires and they're across a whole spectrum of sizes. They're little ones, big ones, and massive ones. And you really never know what you're going to see until you get there. I was sent to a fire a couple of years ago, and upon arrival, we realized it was quite a large fire. It was running across a floodplain and it was moving extremely fast under the winds. The fire was gusting up into the air as the wind pushed it along, and we're seeing flame heights 10 to 20 meters sometimes, depending on the vegetation it was burning through. Now, one of the biggest difficulties when you get to a fire like this is being able to assess it and work out what's going wrong. Of course, the first thing you do is pull out a map, because you need a map to show you the area around you and to see what's happening. Now, one of the beautiful things these days, of course, is we can pull out an iPad. We can pull up something like Google Maps and we can see exactly the terrain and the housing and other assets around a fire to work out what's going on. Of course, then you've got to work out where you're standing and all those other things. Firstly, we can't just run in and attack a fire. When you realize the fire's too big to just attack, you have to think about how you're going to do it. And in this case, the fire was inaccessible too, because it was a floodplain. You couldn't exactly run down there with trucks or anything, because you'd sink and get bogged. So it was a case of working out what's the best way to attack this. Now, the fire was moving basically parallel to where I was standing, which means that I was standing on the flank at the time. The area between me and the fire was relatively low mowed grass, so I knew I had a safe area between where the fire was coming and the houses. What I didn't know was what was going to be in front of the fire. And that's where the map really helped. I realized that, yeah, there was definitely houses in front of that fire, but there seemed to be a gap there. I needed to investigate that gap and work out whether the fire was going to burn straight through it or whether it was going to stop there. And that's something that you can only do when you're on site. So I actually sent off some crew members to have a look, and they came back and were able to tell me, in fact, it's actually mowed green, low grass, and that the fire wasn't going to move through that area. It was going to race up and it was going to stop. And that affected how we planned the attack on the fire. And in this case, the best way to actually attack the fire was to wait it out. We put vehicles down in the safe zone. We waited for the fire to come up to the mowed grass and go out. And we made sure we got any spot overs or embers that were landing near houses and affecting the ground that was unsafe, that we needed to protect. And on the flanks, we just let it burn because we couldn't get anyone in there. And if it burned out, there was nowhere for it to go. As it came out into the lower areas, we were able to extinguish it and put the fire out. People often think when they arrive at a fire that the fire is actually the big danger. And often it isn't. It's actually the things that are happening to the fire. So the wind shifts. It's the fatigue of the firefighters. It's the bad visibility because of the smoke coming towards you. You can't see what's actually happening in the center of the fire. Sometimes it's as simple as the wrong call at the wrong time. And life works like that too. Most people don't burn out because they have too many problems. They burn out because they treat every problem like it needs to be attacked head on. Just like at this fire, attacking the fire head on wasn't the answer to putting the fire out or containing the fire even. We needed to think about what was the best way. Should we take a flank attack? Should we take a full frontal attack? Should we come in from behind and attack it from the burnt area? Each time, each decision is affected by the conditions and what's happening around it. Now, in life, these things happen every day. We have problems and things like difficult people that we deal with on a daily basis. They come into our lives, they approach us, they hit us with all these problems, and we're thinking like, okay, do I actually go this person and say no and really attack them? Or is there a better way to deal with them? We can't always attack people head on. Sometimes we've got to come in from the side. Sometimes we've got to look at the problem from their perspective. And sometimes we've got to ask them, that's a great problem, but is there a solution you can suggest? Because a problem is of no use. If they've got a solution, why don't they bring it to you? Often in workplaces, we also see stress and overload, and this can lead to difficult people. People get stressed up through all of the things in their lives, and it's not always about the work environment that's creating the stress. Sometimes they bring in those stresses from home, and they're wanting to escape home and concentrate on work, but they can't because all that stress is just overloading their brain. And I know certainly with my brain, when it gets that way, it's very hard to think about work things when my brain has so many other things like sick children, money problems, housing problems, all the things that go on in our lives. And they all affect people's ability to think clearly. Family drama is another major cause of these sorts of issues. When you have problems at home and you're having difficult circumstances between people, that carries into people's daily lives. And there's no escaping it because humans are human. How we think about things, how we deal with things, how we approach problems is affected by our family drama. I certainly know that when people are going through dramas at home, when they've got stress and overload, the signs are they start to become difficult or withdraw, one or the other. It's pretty obvious. You notice the change in their behavior. And then you add to that things like business pressures, and we wonder why people flame out. And it makes it very difficult to deal with them. So when we approach people or we approach problems, we need to think about how we're going to do that effectively. And we need to take into consideration all those elements. It's no different to the fire that I mentioned before. We've got high winds, we've got long grass, we've got trees burning, we've got the flame tearing towards houses. But what's actually going on there? What can we do? Where are we going to stop that fire? In my opinion, a lot of self-help advice is rubbish because it only gives people two options: push harder or detach completely. In other words, go head on into the problem or step back and say, it's not my problem. I'm going to offer you a third option that I think is better, and that is making good judgments under pressure. Firstly, I'd like to put forward the thinking of react or respond. So many times when we're faced with a problem, we react to it. And this is very bad from my point of view. In other words, someone comes to you with a problem, you arc up or you give them an answer straight away and send them off. That's not the way to deal with a problem. When we react to problems, we don't actually consider the problem. We don't consider what's going on. We don't ask good questions to get good information to make good decisions. So I put forward that you need to respond to problems rather than react to them. So when we respond to problems, we follow a simple process which helps us actually deal with the problem in a better way. So my process is very simple. First, stop. You need to stop and think about what's happening. You need to take a breath and just chill for 10 seconds. Let it wash over you. Take that breath and then start to assess the problem. When we assess a problem, we're now asking questions. We're gathering information. We're finding out all those things we need to find before we make a decision. And we all know that we need 70% of the answers before we can make a good decision. So if we can ask some questions, we can then assess the problem properly. Once we have that, we can then plan. So when we put our plan together, we look at what we've got. So on the fireground, I looked at the map. I got the information from my crews. I looked at where the fire would stop and what would happen when it stopped there, such as embers flying over and starting small spot fires near fences and things like that. So I put crews in there. I got my plan together. And then once you've got your plan, you put it into action. And that's where it really starts to happen. So we don't just react and action, get the problem, take action. That's dangerous because you're making unconsidered decisions. We put it into action we see what happens. Now, things don't always work out. We alter our plan, we move things around, and we make it work to solve the problem. When we get to the end, we then look at debriefing. And this is the most important part. And this is something you can do with your teams at your work or at a fire station, is debriefing. Every single incident, every time something happens, you need to debrief. Why? Because that's where we learn. That's where we learn from our mistakes and from our wins. So we look at what went well, what didn't go so well, and what we could do better in the future. So stop, assess, plan, action, and debrief. Very simple. Rather than reacting to a problem straight away, we respond to that problem. And this is a far more positive plan on how to deal with issues. It'll help you stop wasting energy on the wrong fires. People put too much energy into the wrong places. Once you've stopped and assessed things, you're going to be able to work out whether this is a real problem, whether it's a big problem, or whether it's nothing at all. In firefighting, we talk about dealing with fires in different ways. We fight it when the issue is real, urgent, and actionable. In other words, we can go straight in and fight it. And that might work on a small fire. We can just go into action. Secondly, we flank it when a direct attack is dumb. So we take out the edges of the fire, moving towards the head of the fire and take it out. Or lastly, we let it burn when a fire isn't our problem or the interference makes it worse. And when I say it isn't our problem, I mean it's in an area that we can't access it, or it's dangerous to be near the fire. Sometimes fires are impossible to fight. They're too big. So fight it, flank it, or let it burn. The three key things that we have to decide. And the same goes in any business situation. You need to decide it. Should you fight that problem? Should you attack it from the sides? For example, finding out more information, looking for a different way to attack the problem rather than going head on with somebody. Or should you let it burn? It's not your problem. It actually belongs to another team or another team leader, but support them to solve the problem. Three simple decisions to help you decide whether that fire is actually your issue or not. When we look at whether we should fight it, there's a whole pile of things we could talk about here. First of all, like a health issue, a hard conversation, or an overdue decision. Those are all things that we have to decide, should we fight it? A health issue, for example, if we find we have some serious disease, do we decide to fight it or do we decide not to? Do we go head on, or is there other methods of attacking it? We need to make those decisions because how we attack things is important. Some problems get more expensive the more you delay them, so they need to be fought head on. Do we flank it? A conflict at work, an online business bottleneck, or a recurring household problem. Sometimes it's not changing how we attack a problem isn't an issue. Sometimes the smart move is changing the angle of attack. So if we have a recurring household pattern and we keep attacking it the same way, so one of the children come home, they keep having the same problem, we keep telling them the same thing and nothing changes, maybe it's time to think about attacking it in a different way. Maybe we need to flank this problem. Attacking it head on is not solving the problem. And lastly, should we let it burn? It's someone else's chaos, it's attention-seeking behavior, endless arguments, or impossible expectations from people. If the fire feeds on your attention, your ego, or dealing with it yourself and it makes you feel better, then maybe stepping back could be a smart move. It's always wiser to decide whose problem it is. Now, that doesn't mean washing your hands of problems and saying, oh, that's just someone else's problems. What I'm saying is taking it on board as if you own it when it isn't your responsibility. This is where I differ from many people when it comes to self-help advice. Often I'll see people say you need to define the problem, attack the problem, and then walk away. That doesn't work in the real world in my experience. In my experience, it's making the judgment on how to deal with the problem. Do we fight it head on? Do we flank it? Or do we just let it burn? So how do you use this in real life. Think of one current fire that's happening in your life. Ask yourself these questions. What's the actual problem? What are the conditions that are causing that problem? What's within your control? And then call it. Do you fight it? Do you flank it? Or do you let it burn? If you like, reply to this episode with one word: fight, flank, or burn. Tell me the fire you're dealing with and which call you think it needs. If enough people respond, I'll turn this into a little series about dealing with problems. The challenge is not learning how to fight harder. It's learning how to make the right call. Some problems need action now, some need a different angle, and others need you to step back and stop feeding them your time, attention, and ego. Before you charge in, stop, assess, ask yourself what's actually within your control. Remember, do you react or do you respond? You cannot control every fire, but you can control the call you make. So think about one fire you're dealing with right now. Are you going to fight it, flank it, or let it burn? Reply to this episode with one word: fight, flank, or burn, and tell me what call you're making. Until next time, stay calm, make the right call, and run towards the flames that are truly yours to fight. If today's episode hit home, take 60 seconds to share it with a friend you trust. These conversations matter. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one for more real-world leadership tips coming your way. And if you want to go deeper into these fireground leadership lessons on how to deal with change, please grab your copy of my book, Run Towards the Flame, from Amazon.com. It's packed with stories and strategies from over 20 years of fighting fires in the Australian bush and leading a successful marketing business. See you next time.